Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. Today we're going to continue our free mixing course that I promised you. I think over 5,000 people voted that you wanted a free mixing course and a free mastering course. So this is part, I forget what part this is, but today we're going to focus on stereo imaging, and I'll show you how to understand mono, stereo, sides, middle, and how it all combines to create a bigger sounding mix without making mistakes. So let's hop into the DAW and let's get to rocking. So the first thing you need to understand is what is mono, what's stereo. Mono means one, okay? One directional, one signal. Okay, so let's have this sound. We're gonna pan this to the left. Okay, so it's a single sound. It's mono. There's nothing on the left and the right side unless I pan the sound. So when mono does not mean centered, okay? Mono means one. You could pan mono stuff to the left. You could pan mono stuff to the right. It does not mean center. Okay, so just understand that difference. Let's pan this hard left. Now I've cloned that exact sound into another sound. Actually, before we pan it, let's have these stack on top of each other. So what happens if I add another oscillator that's a mono oscillator in the same positioning in the center? The sound gets doubly as loud because it's stacking on top of each other. The waves are stacking up. So +1 + 1 = 2. So now we have a bigger sound, a louder sound, I should say. So what happens if I pan these sounds hard left and hard right? You may think you're going to get a stereo sound, okay? By panning the same exact sound to the left and the same exact sound to the right. You think you would get stereo, but listen to what happens. It sounds like it's dead center. And that's because our left ear is not hearing a difference than our right ear. Whenever our left ear and our right ear hear the same exact thing at the same exact volume, same exact everything, we synthesize, our brain literally creates mono. Okay, so what we can do to make this sound stereo is change something about one of these sounds. So I'm gonna change the pitch subtly about oscillator 2. So we'll start to hear the difference between the right and the left ear simply because I'm changing the tuning of the right ear from the tuning of the left ear. And now we perceive stereo width. I'm gonna do it slower because I did it pretty fast. So listen to how it sounds dead center. And as I mess with the pitch knob, you feel like there's a difference between your left and your right ear, and that creates this stereo width perception. And that's where binaural beats and all that comes from. It's the frequency difference between the left and the right. Okay, so what I'm trying to show you here is that stereo is not just panning stuff left and right. Stereo is a difference of the left and the right. Okay, so stereo means full body. Okay, we're creating a full image, a full body. Remember, think of sounds as mass in a room, like objects in a room. I have speakers behind the camera. let me go big screen. I just ate something like super out of breath. I didn't realize till just now. But think about this microphone. It's an object in the room. I can't place anything here because the microphone is in the way. The same thing with your mix. I have things that are in this room that are taking up space. All of your sounds take up space. When you have low frequency sounds, they're at the bottom of the mix. When you have high frequency sounds, they're perceived as higher. If you're playing your sounds over speakers, you'll understand this a lot better because it just feels like it's higher up in the room. Okay, so sound has depth, meaning it has front to backness. If a sound is louder, it's seen as closer to my actual body. Notice how when I get closer to the mic, it sounds like I'm louder, but if I go further away, it sounds like I'm just farther away because the volume is lower. Okay, so the farther something goes away from the source, the lower the volume perception. All right, so let's hop back into the DAW. I just wanted to go over those few basic things to help you understand that stereo is a difference between the left and the right ear. Okay, so let's get into how to apply this to our mix. So the first thing most people do is they overly widen things. Okay, so let's open up this imager one more time and let's see how wide this track actually is. Now what most beginners do is they want to widen the whole track. So what they'll do is they'll turn on what's called stereoization mode. And what they do is stereoization is creating a time delay between your left ear and the right ear. So this is usually used for individual instruments. It's not used for the entire mix because again, we're duplicating the sound from the left ear to the right ear after this value. And if you go back to the delay video that we did, I talked about those values. Up to about 20 milliseconds is where humans can start to feel delay. So anything before 20 milliseconds, we perceive as like a phase or a flanger. Okay, so I'm going to exaggerate this so you can hear, but stereorizing again creates that left and that right difference. Now I got to figure out how to turn this thing on. They've changed a couple things, so let me figure out which button to press here. All right, so what they make you do is make you widen it first, and then these buttons activate. So again, from here, what I'm doing is I'm creating a delay between the left and the right ear. 20 milliseconds is audible delay in my, we found in the delay example. So now this is widening the track by delaying one sound to the left and then delaying another sound to the right. So it creates this pseudo panning situation. And I wouldn't use stereoization on an entire track. I would use that on individual sounds. So let's say I have a mono source. Let's go back to our pattern here. And let's say we have a mono source, which is this sine wave here. Now let's open up the same imager. Now what I'm going to do is stereoize this sound. Let's widen it, turn on the stereoization. And now it will have a small delay that you can't really detect, but it delays the sound to the left and the right. It's widening the sound. It's creating a false stereo image. Not false, it's creating a stereo image. Okay, so now it has stereo width, even though it's a mono sound. So you can use this to make stuff wider, but remember that stereo is more than just panning stuff from left to right. It's also small pitch differences. So sometimes it might be better to have a mono source, and let's say you want a mono source to sound bigger, just duplicate the mono source and just change the pitch just subtly and pan that to the right and the left, or just redo the take and then have small changes between the two and then pan those left and right. That's I would say a more efficient way of getting stereo content than using a stereoizer. Okay, because again, stereo is more than just copying something from the left to the right. So let's open up the imager again. Let's see the whole track. Now, again, the biggest mistake I see producers make is they overly widen their tracks. So let's turn off the stereoizer. And now we're just expanding the width of this track. So this plugin basically takes stuff that's a little more narrow. Okay, I want you to think about stereo width like narrow or wide, not necessarily mono or stereo, just narrow or wide. All the way narrow is mono. A little bit narrow has stereo width, and then fully wide is like a wide stereo image. So now I'm going to overly crank this so you can hear how. Now, another thing is that over your headphones, you can't really perceive the stereo width because you're only hearing two ears and you're not seeing an image. I know that sounds crazy that you can see music, but when you have speakers, you can see where stuff is panned. You can feel it. You can feel how wide it is. So when I'm going to mess with this knob officially, I'm going to use my monitors to help me with the stereo image. Let's crank this up though. Now what happens when people widen the stereo image too much is they dull the sound, because what we're doing, again, going back to the very beginning, is we're taking stuff in the middle and we're delaying it subtly to the left and delaying it a little to the right. So imagine you have a kick drum in the middle. It's very impactful, has a lot of low end. Now we're duplicating it and panning it. It's going to feel less impact because you're not feeling the energy from one direction. You're feeling it from multiple directions. Okay, so sometimes if you want more impact, you want it more narrow, okay, not wider. Depends on the sound that you're going for. Now this track has light enough percussion to where I can't really overly make this wide, but if I had a lot more elements that were already panned, you would hear this effect. Now there's something called correlation. Don't get obsessed with this stuff, but basically this correlation tracer will, if it's in the red a lot, that means you're panning so far that it's changing the phase of the sound. And when you have changes in your phase, you have wave cancellation. So that can actually be destructive to overly widen something, because now we're flipping the phase or changing the phase, and it offsets and it starts canceling out certain frequency content. So if this little meter basically goes below this line and turns red for a long period of time, that's not a good thing. Now this track doesn't have a lot of stuff going on, so it's never in the red, but I've seen tracks easily go in the red if you overly pan stuff. So again, you have to remember the thought process of a sound designer. A sound designer wants you to hear and feel stuff like ear candy. Candy in the ear is really when you have small things on the left, small things on the right. There's nothing that's the same between the two for the most part. And when you get a piano, it just sounds cooler. Let's just show you this in real time. I'm not going to try to convince you. I'm just going to show you. Okay, so we have a FL Keys right here. Okay, so let me switch my screen. Okay, I've imported some MIDI into the piano. So what I want you to hear is mono versus stereo. Let's go to our mixer now, which is this icon with the fader. And in FL, you can click this little button that says View Extra Volume and Stereo Properties. Turn that on so that you can have this little knob down here that allows you to control stereo separation. Let's pull this to merged, or meaning collapsed to center. Let's pull that in. So now the piano is mono. Okay, we went from a stereo default sound to a mono sound. So I'm going to play the mono sound, and then I'll send the FL Keys to a reverb to widen the sound, and you'll see how just it sounds better widened. Okay, now let's widen the sound by sending this mono sound to a reverb, which will again create those delays and widen it out to stereo width. Instantly sounds better because it's wider, even though it's a mono sound. Okay, so my goal in giving you that little example is to say that we tend to like stereo sounds a little bit more than mono sounds. So a lot of your plugins that you're going to get will have sounds that are already stereo, and you have a bunch of stereo content overlapped on more stereo content, overlapped on more stereo content. It creates a lot of buildup in the side of your record. So the first place people don't really check is the sides of the record. Sides meaning that hard left, hard right spectrum. Okay, not that dead center image. Everything that's not dead center, basically. Okay, now what happens if we open up an analysis? I'm going to open up a multi-band compressor from FabFilter here, just for display purposes. Now let's see how much information in this track is on the side. I'm going to make this entire, see if I can stretch this the entire way. Let's audition only the side. Now notice how you won't even be able to hear my voice because my voice is mono and it's centered. Now the side is everything else. So if I keep turning this up, you won't be able to hear me after I keep talking. My voice is... So that's a lot of information in the sides of the track. Now let's switch this to mono and see how much information we have dead center or in the middle. So let's solo the middle and see if this track can live with only the middle information. The track can live with only the mid information, but it just sounds not full. It just sounds a little thin. So there are ways you can mix from that perspective to help you get that groove tighter, because it's easier to hear volume changes or gaps in time when you're centered, because you're only listening to one direction. When you have stereo, you have so many different angles of volume changes. It's very hard to hear the groove when you have it opened up like that. So that's why some people may tell you to practice mixing in mono, because you could just hear time changes easier. So what I want to do is show you that sometimes making your track more narrow will help. So let's open up this compressor. This is a multi-band compressor called FabFilter Pro MB. And I'm going to switch this to side so that we're only affecting the stuff on the sides. I'll make it a more realistic curvature, and I'm going to take out certain frequencies in the sound. And the only question I'm going to ask is, does it sound cleaner? Does it sound full? What do you feel after I make these changes? Now I need to audition so I can hear the frequency. So what I've done is just tame that low end on the sides. I want the low end to be centered and focused to get that perceived impact. Now I'm going to use an expansion. These aren't hard rules. I'm just doing this to exaggerate certain things. And let's switch this to mid mode. Let's see if this percussion benefits any by pulling up those sides of that percussion transient. Not a huge difference. This is very subtle. Something that's more creative than it is technical. Okay, so again, most people need to make their tracks more narrow. So let's open up an imager to tighten up the sound a little bit. So there are many ways you can handle the stereo image. You don't need an imager. You can also use, mid-side EQs or mid-side compressors to lower the volume of the sides, for example, and stuff will feel more tight or more narrow because you're taking away volume from the side. So you don't need an imager necessarily. But let's use this imager and let's create little bands. So let's solo. This is everything below about, 150? We usually, there's not a hard rule. I don't want to ever tell you there's hard rules in music. Usually we pull that to the center just so we don't have all that buildup on the sides that can cause clipping and different things when you run through different plugins. Let's make a nice wide band. Let's solo this mid band. This is where the track really lives, from about 500 to 5 kilohertz. This is where the track has its main life. And here we can determine how wide we want this track to live for the most part. Let's widen this out. Now, because this track has not a lot of stuff going on, I can widen it without really destroying the signal. Let's solo these highs. And now I have a new feature called Recover Sides. Again, this is adding volume back to the sides because depending on what you collapse to be more narrow, it's going to pull that back up in volume to try and match the difference you created. So now that bass is a little more full on the side. Let's hear it with and without. It's a little... This adds to me a little like a little fullness. Doesn't do make a huge difference there. Okay, but let's just do the complete opposite and pull stuff more mono. Mono gives you the perception of tightness because everything is controlled and it's more centered and it's not all over the place, literally left and right. So rarely do I I don't go full mono because that's not really the experience I found that I like to hear. But most of the time when you have a wide track, you have to remember the samples you get are already widened. Sometimes you need to pull them tighter because you're adding more width to something that's already wide. So in that case, it's more corrective. You need to narrow stuff down because you're going to be widening it. Okay, so this is more for people who use samples. Like for example, we have a new sample pack coming out by LA Crisis. Let me pull up one of the loops. Okay, the pack is called Conceptions, and let's pick something close to 89 BPM. Let's say 78 BPM. Drag this in. Now I'm not trying to make this musically correct. All right, so I pulled in the loop. The music doesn't, I'm not making a beat right now. I just overlapped the loop. Okay, so what people don't check, remember, when you're pulling in loops and material that's already made and presets from plugins, you don't realize how wide those sounds actually are. So let's examine how wide this loop actually is. Pretty wide. Look at this width right here. So imagine a sound that's already wide. I'm going to solo just the loop. And let's widen a sound that's already wide. I'm going to show you what happens with most producers because they're overly widening stuff. Let's link these. Let's go to the phase correlation. Now we're having phase issues because we don't realize that the sound was already wide and we're trying to widen the entire mix, but we're also affecting that sound that was already wide, which creates that phase problem that I spoke about. So the sample isn't bad. It's because you guys are adding width where there doesn't need to be width. So you need to take care of the stereo width of each instrument. That's why I said each sound is an object in the room. You need to determine how wide each object is. If you have a room that's 10 by 10 and you try to expand something beyond the walls, it's going to fold back on itself. And that's called phase issues. Okay. So the same way you can't do it in a real room, you're trying to do it in the computer and it doesn't work that way. So let's narrow this sound so that when we widen the whole track, it's getting wider with the track as an entire track. So let's pull this a little more narrow. We don't want it too narrow to where we're taking out the ear candy. I'd say about there is a safe spot. So we still have width, but it's a controlled width, okay? So instead of a size, large, it's a size medium as far as width. Now when we go to open up the entire track, they can have a new pack out with LA Crisis called Conceptions. It'll be at busyworksbeats.com. That's where the loop's from. So see how we're still getting the width, but it's not having issues like before. So most of your problems are in the sides of your track. So if you have a muddy track, check the sides. If you have a track that has weird phase problems, check the sides. If you have loops that aren't matching, check the sides. It's all about the side, the reverb on the side. Okay, so let me see. There's one more thing I'll do here, and I'll just show you how much the side information can stack up. All right, so let's go back to our piano example. So not only do we have to EQ out, the reverb, a lot of people just neglect the sides. So what I'm going to do, let's use Ozone EQ because it's quicker to just show you. Let's do mid-side mode and let's solo only the sides of the reverb. So you're only going to be able to hear the side information. So that's a lot of information. Remember, the side information is the key component of the reverb because I took a mono sound, a centered sound, and ran it through a reverb, which created the side information. Remember, the side information was not there before the reverb on that piano. So that means the majority of the reverb sound is going to be on the sides. Let's see what's in the middle of our reverb. Okay, now let's go back to the sides. Now we need to control this. You don't need to make dramatic EQ curves. Okay, I'm just going to use a high pass filter to get rid of some stuff. And take care of some of these peaks here. Looks like our CPU is getting high, so I'm going to end this video pretty soon. Looks like we're... All right, so we're back. So with the keys running through the reverb, you're only hearing the side information. So what I'm going to do is take out a lot of the side information because I have to ask, does it really add to the image or does it just muddy up everything else? Okay, so I'm just taking care of some of these peaks, that sharp energy that you see, those sharp points. Lets me know those are sharp spots. You don't need to be meticulous with this. I'm just chopping out some stuff. Now this plugin is giving me a little bit of a CPU spike here. So we're gonna move back to this sound. But now that we've taken out some of those frequencies, we can now see, I'm hitting all the wrong buttons. It just sounds like cleaner reverb because we've taken out a lot of stuff that we didn't necessarily need. That was just adding up on the sides. So let's turn off the EQ. Here's without the EQ. Just listen to how much energy builds up. Here's with the EQ. It just sounds more controlled. and more flat instead of just all over the place. You can even tame it further with some multi-band compression if you wanted. On the sides, I mean. So what I would do, let me just show you how to do it. I would go, okay, let's pull up an MB. I'm gonna switch it to expert mode, put it on side, and then turn this knob to the right, fader to the right. Audition the sides. Now again, I'm gonna turn off the direct piano signal so you only hear the reverb now. And I'm just gonna find where the sound builds up a lot, which is this range right here, the solo. Just gonna compress it. You can compress it however much you want. There's no right or wrong way. Just want to take care of the area where it's building up. So that was the build up on the sides. So now I have reverb, but it's just not adding all that unnecessary information on the side. So what I'm going to do is A/B it. I'm going to turn off my mic so you can hear all this laptop air. So I'm going to turn on and off the EQ and compression. And I didn't take care of the center signal, but I just wanted to show you the power of just controlling those sides and that information and energy. Okay, so let's, this track doesn't need much because it's very percussive. There's not a lot of frequency content. I'm not gonna show you how to mix the entire track. I just want you to really separate the middle information from the side information. Don't overly obsess with the side information because if you take out too much, it will collapse the sound and make it smaller. And if you add too much side information, it will sound like your middle doesn't even exist. And it just sounds like two speakers on the left and right. So there's a balance about this. We're gonna move it to the next video. I wanna appreciate you and thank you. It's a game from BusyWorksBeats.com. I need you to subscribe if you're new, like the video, share with a friend so we can expand. We're trying to reach 1 million subscribers. I need your help. Thank you guys, peace.